This story of our Holy Father, Pope Pius XII, filmed in the Vatican, recalls to my mind many memories. Memories of peace years, when I lived and labored within the walls of this historic city and shared rare hours with Cardinal Pacelli, at that time Secretary of State to Pope Pius XI. It also recalls the sad but precious days spent with His Holiness during the war years, when I received the blessing of the pastor Angelicus to give solace to sons suffering and dying on the battlefronts of the world. Often during our visits at eventide in his private chapel, I was privileged to unite my prayers for peace with the pleadings of the Pope as together we recited the Rosary. Then came the dawn of peace, and on my shoulders and in my heart were placed the sacred honor and responsibility of the cardinalate by our Holy Father. These scenes I lived again in memory as I watched unfold this story of the Pope.
On February 10th, 1939, an anxious, silent crowd stood in St. Peter's Square in Rome, their eyes on the Vatican as they awaited for news of the critically ill 82-year-old Pope Pius XI. As they kept their vigil, death ended the 17-year-old reign of the aged pontiff. When his fisherman's ring and papal seals were broken, the grieving crowd was told of his death. Four days later, on February 14th, Pope Pius XI was buried in the crypt of St. Peter's Basilica, where also lies the fisherman apostle who became the first of the pontiffs. Now the 261st direct successor of St. Peter rests beside him. But this is not the end of succession, for Christ's words still ring true. The gates of hell shall not prevail. Cardinals from all parts of the world arrive for the conclave, which begins on the 10th day following the pontiff's death. During the election, they will be cut off from all communication with the outside world. Up until 1878, they had to bring their own meals, but now a common kitchen is provided. The assumption in former days was that if they brought their own food, the majority would be more quickly arrived at. The usual form of election is the secret ballot, and in it the successful candidate requires a 2/3 vote, exclusive of his own. Through the centuries, the cardinals have met in these conclaves to elect English, Italian, French, Greek, and Spanish popes. The voting takes place in the famous and beautiful Sistine Chapel, where the cardinals sit on improvised thrones around the wall. The papal newspaper carries pictures of the candidates, while the crowds wait and the cardinals vote. Preparations go forward for the new pontiff, whoever he is to be. His vestments are laid out, among which are his mitre, the ceremonial headdress of a bishop, and the tiara. This threefold crown is supposed to symbolize the pontiff's threefold power: the power of orders, of spiritual and temporal jurisdiction. This portable chair on which the Holy Father is carried into St. Peter's on the most solemn occasions is called the sedia gestatoria. Each cardinal's ballot is placed in a chalice on the chapel altar. After the vote provided the needed majority, the burning ballots send white smoke pouring through the chimney in the roof of the Sistine Chapel, thus telling the waiting crowds that the chair of St. Peter has been filled. The Cardinal Dean then, as is the custom, announces the election from the balcony over the middle door of St. Peter's. Cardinal Eugenio Pacelli, who had been Secretary of State to Pope Pius XI, has been elected Pope, and the name he has chosen is Pius XII. Forecasting the result of a papal election correctly is a very difficult thing. But the name of Cardinal Pacelli had been on many lips in the crowd. The former papal Secretary of State, arrayed for the first time in the vestments of his great office, prepares for his first appearance as Vicar of Christ before the public. The new ring of the fisherman, a gold ring which, like the bishop's ring, symbolizes fidelity to the church, is kissed by the high dignitaries present. This ring represents St. Peter fishing and symbolizes the call of our Lord to Peter to be a fisher of men. The statue of St. Peter broods down on the scene as the crowds below wait for his 262nd successor. For the first time since 1870, the pontiff appears on the balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square to give his benediction to the city and the world. The tiara is placed upon the head of the new pontiff.
Absolutionem et redemptionem quondam peccatorum vestrorum sanctum vere et virtuosa penitentia cortem praesentes et emendatione vita gratiam et consolationem Sancti Spiritus et divinam perseverantiam in boni tutelibus qui pote votis omnipotens et misericors Domini. Omnipotens semper.
Sounds impossible, but 300 men in 15 minutes have placed the thousands of torches used in the illumination of St. Peter's. Something only done in celebration of a canonization or the election of a new pontiff. In this case, they announce without knowing it that he whose name, Pacelli, means peace, will live in a world aflame with war. The celebration over, Vatican City settles down to its normal routine, though the average person would hardly care to include the precarious removal of torches as part of his daily task. He is one of the San Pietrini, men who have lived inside of the Vatican enclosure for generations and who supply the steeplejacks for St. Peter's. In the holiest of places, men swing through the air with the greatest of ease. Included among them are grooms and chair porters, and the many artisans and artists whose duty it is to keep the precious artwork in constant repair. This member of the San Pietrini, like his ancestors, works in the shadow of the colossal statues which stand on the top of the facade. These are the statues of Christ and the 12 apostles, each 18.5 feet high. The other statues are of saints and angels. St. Paul holds a sword, symbolizing his death by decapitation. The faces of these statues were purposely distorted by the artist to make them look normal from the ground. Malachy, an Irish abbot, in 1139 made prophecies concerning outstanding traits, which would be found in future popes from his time to the end of the world. This is the statue of Pastor Angelicus, the angelic shepherd, the name prophesied by Malachy for Pius XII. What manner of man is it who is elected to rule this great spiritual empire? There is a rather general misconception that he is a one-sided character, an ascetic, a contemplative, living only in the shades and shadows of the cross. This indeed he is, but these qualities are balanced by a profound grasp of world problems, known only to him who has his finger on the pulse of contemporary civilization. As 6 world powers strove to effect world peace on March the 2nd, 1876, the future Pius XII was born in this old mansion in Rome. His father was Filippo Pacelli, a lawyer. His mother, the former Virginia Graziosi. At this font, he was baptized as Eugene Joseph John Pacelli. Even popes were once small boys. His education began at the school of St. Philip Neri. He once played during recess periods on the same steps on which these children are playing. This lad today at St. Philip Neri is treading in the footsteps of the young Eugene Pacelli, who was also an altar boy. A picture of him and his fellow students. This seminary in Rome is called the Capranica and is 400 years old. Many cardinals and popes have been numbered among its graduates. Eugenio Pacelli entered this seminary in 1894 at the age of 18. He was ordained priest April 2nd, 1899. His first assignment was to the Church of St. Mary Major, and it was in this church that he celebrated his first Mass. At the age of 22, he earned his doctorate in philosophy, theology, canon and civil law, and then taught canon law. His brilliance was brought to the attention of Cardinal Gaspari, Vatican Secretary of State. In 1914, Cardinal Gaspari, impressed by his brilliance, asked him to resign his chair of canon law to become his assistant in the office of Extraordinary Ecclesiastical Affairs. On May 13th, 1917, he was consecrated a bishop of the church. That very year of 1917, while the world was at war, he began a 12-year career in Munich as papal nuncio. In December 1929, the purple of his episcopacy is brightened to the red of the cardinalate. On February 7th, 1930, he succeeded Cardinal Gaspari as Secretary of State. At the age of 54, he thus becomes the top official in what diplomats call the best informed foreign office in the world. The Eucharistic Congress of 1934 was held in Argentina. The Cardinal Secretary of State was sent to this Congress as pontifical legate. The first of these Eucharistic Congresses was held in Lille, France, in 1881. Their purpose is to diffuse love of the sacrament which Christ gave the night of the Last Supper. Men on dying leave in their last testaments what they have. Christ left what he is. The Cardinal's deep love of the Eucharistic Lord inspired him to travel to these congresses in many parts of the world. In 1935, the Cardinal Secretary of State attended the Eucharistic Congress in Lourdes, France, where in 1858 the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to Saint Bernadette under her title of the Immaculate Conception. Future Pontiff visits the United States. With the then Bishop Spellman as his guide during his entire stay, he visits Mount Vernon. Fordham University is honored by his presence and his words.
That there is a great need today of an education of the heart and of the will, as well as of the mind and of the intellect. An education will develop the whole man, morally as well as intellectually, spiritually as well as scientifically.
In 1938, Cardinal Pacelli attended the Eucharistic Congress in Budapest. While the world was talking of inevitable progress, the intervals between wars were becoming less and less. The interval between the Napoleonic and the Franco-Prussian War was about 55 years. The interval between the Franco-Prussian War and the First World War was about 43 years. And the interval between the First and Second World War, then about to begin, 21 years. 55, 43, 21. This was hardly progress. Hardly had the hymns of the celebration died away when the war that he saw coming broke to remind men that the only true progress consists in the diminishing of the traces of sin. Though he knew war was near, he did not know that the following year he would be called on to assume the leadership of the Church in the midst of its greatest persecution and darkest days. Little did those who carried the pontiff know the weight he carried in his heart. He told this narrator that all the pains and agonies of the world, if concentrated in a single heart, could not equal what he suffered in being named the chief shepherd of the Church. The Holy Father begins his day by swinging open his window to proclaim readiness to serve the world as the servant of the servants of God. The first to enter the Pontiff's private library every morning at 9 o'clock is the Cardinal Secretary of State, who is his Prime Minister, and as such reports about the general affairs of the Church and its relations with the various countries. After him follow other cardinals, who must give a weekly report to the Holy Father about their activities and submit to him certain decisions for his final approval. To administer the shepherding of over 340 million sheep on 108 acres is no small task. A visitor inquires from a Swiss guard how to join one of the public audiences. The service in the Vatican of the colorful Swiss guards dates from the 15th century, when a treaty between Julius II and the two cantons of Zurich and Lucerne provided for supplying a bodyguard of Swiss to the Holy See. They number exactly 100 men, including 6 officers. Their picturesque uniform of black, red, and yellow was designed in the 16th century by Michelangelo. They are real guards, not honorary, and are responsible for guarding the person of the pontiff and for the protection of the apostolic palaces. Candidates must be Swiss, Catholic, at least 5 feet 8 in height, and unmarried. Despite the advances of mechanized warfare, the papal guards still carry only the traditional spear. They must be present both in the Vatican and in St. Peter's on all occasions when the Holy Father is present. An elderly couple on their way to a public audience inquire directions from a Palatine Guard. The Palatine Guard is a guard of honor composed of citizens of Rome who render this honorary service to the pontiff in their spare time. They form a battalion of 4 companies, each of about 100 men. If the crowds are large enough, these public audiences are held in the very large hall above the entrance of St. Peter's, called the Hall of Beatifications. From this hall open the doors upon the famous balcony from which the pontiff on solemn occasions gives his blessing to the multitude in St. Peter's Square. This hall often holds as many as 4,000 visitors at a time during a public audience. On some days, these audiences continue from 9 in the morning until 1 o'clock. The Holy Father is always accompanied by the master of the household, a few papal chamberlains, and of course his Swiss guards and the noble guards, who are 90 men chosen from the Roman nobility. As His Holiness extends his hands, everyone who can kisses his ring. because of the pontiff's crowded hours, the master of the household constantly must remind him of other waiting appointments. In addition to the private and public audiences granted by the Holy Father, there are special groups like these little girls who have just received their first communion. Such radiant faces betray not only the innocence of their souls, but their loyalty and love as lambs to him whom they revere as the shepherd of the faithful. There is no part of the world without some faithful who seek to pay tribute to the Holy Father, even royal blood recognizing a higher royalty. On the other hand, there is no person too humble or low in rank to be received an audience by him who is conscious of his divine mandate to be the minister of all. The dreadful war years which marked the beginning of the reign of Pius XII greatly increased the number of serious matters to which he had to give his daily attention. At the outbreak of the war, the Vatican Bureau of Information was established. Here relatives and friends of prisoners of war and missing persons made their inquiries, which inquiries were sent out by shortwave over the Vatican radio station to papal nuncios and delegates all over the world. From this level, the searches are conducted through all the channels of the Church's vast organization, down to individual communities. Replies came back at the rate of 150,000 a year, telling a grieving family or friend whether a loved one is alive or dead. This is a service which, since its beginning, has been given free to everyone, without distinction as to race, nationality, or creed. The Holy Father is particularly proud that he located and befriended thousands upon thousands of Jews who had become victims of a totalitarian cruelty. The then Archbishop Spellman, during a visit to Rome, took a great interest in this work. Work being done with only one view in mind: the good of humanity. The Holy Father may be likened to a father who had several sons fighting in the various and opposing armies of the world. For that reason, during the war, every soldier was welcome at the Vatican. regardless of his nationality, for the decisions of governments are not always to be blamed on those who live under them. The peaceful atmosphere of St. Peter's Square with its beautiful fountain, reflecting the colors of the rainbow as the sun sets in the flaming monstrance of the west, or steals in chapel windows, contrasts in awful solemnity with the crimson fountains that are opened in the far-flung battlefronts of the turbulent world, all of which has concerned His Holiness since he flung open his window that morning. Closing of the shutters signifies the pontiff closing out the world at the end of the day, leaving him the night hours for study, prayer, and a few hours' sleep. It is the same sun that rises on St. Peter's, but in its light come new crowds bringing their new burdens to his day. Nuns who take the vow of poverty still desire what to them is riches, an audience with their Holy Father. A woman does not cease to be a woman when she becomes a nun, and nervousness is indeed excusable in the greatest moment of their lives. One sister fumbles quickly for her beads for the Holy Father to bless. Written on the faces of these holy women can be seen that deep fire which Thompson called the passionless passion, the wild tranquility. Newlyweds who are without a worry add their pressure to the pontiff's busy day. In a world of broken treaties and contracts, the Holy Father blesses the young couples and reminds them of the sacredness of marriage. For there are only two words in the vocabulary of love: you and always. You, because love is unique. Always, because love is enduring. What the family is, that is the nation. Hence his encouragement to these young couples to use love not to scorch the flesh, but to solder life. Visitors to the Vatican, if they are fortunate enough to be visiting at the right time, are attracted by the sound of beautiful choral singing. Probably the best known of the Vatican choirs is that directed by Monsignor Parosi. This choir and its successive group of singers with the voices of angels have been his particular charge through many years. The Church remembers the words of St. Augustine, "He who sings twice prays." The roof of St. Peter's is not like most roofs, a vacant surface. It is something of a village. "12 domes of different sizes rise from the roof above the side chapels of the church. Above all else towers the greatest dome that was ever thrown against the vault of heaven's blue. Constant care is required to keep and repair a dome that rises 449 feet above the ground and a church that covers a space of 6 acres. The heavy Doric columns designed by Bernini, which support the roof, form 2 colonnades, each 55 feet wide. The 372 columns are 52 feet high and 5 feet in diameter. The great fountain has sent its waters 45 feet into the air for the last 300 years. To vary slightly the rigorous daily routine, the Holy Father occasionally visits Castel Gandolfo, his summer palace. The Holy Father's cars used for these trips are mostly rather old models. They were presented by different American, Italian, and French automobile manufacturers. The one he prefers happens to be that of American workmanship. The Italian car presented by the Fiat factory was built by the workmen on their own time, and all the material was donated by admirers. The grounds of the Castel Gandolfo are slightly larger than the Vatican itself, and are, like the Vatican, extraterritorial, as is any place in Italy where the pontiff might for a time take up his residence. These include many buildings in Rome, such as some churches, colleges, and the papal ministries. Word spreads rapidly that the Pope is in temporary residence, and a crowd gathers to greet him and receive his benediction. This short respite over, the pontiff has returned to the Vatican. Mr. Myron Taylor, personal representative of the President of the United States, arrives through the Bronze Gate. He ascends toward his audience by the Scala Regia, that magnificent staircase which was also designed by Bernini. Mr. Taylor receives from the Swiss Guard the salute befitting his rank. Mr. Taylor is followed later in the morning by the ex-Prime Minister Winston Churchill. His Holiness does not only remain in the Vatican and wait for the world to come to him, his voice goes out regularly to the world over the airwaves. Pontiffs today from the Vatican communicate with more of their faithful in a few seconds than did Peter and Paul in their entire lives. The Savior's command is taken seriously. Preach the gospel to all nations. This is station HBJ, the Vatican's private radio station installed by the famous Marconi, where the advance of science and defense of religion go hand in hand. Steel fingers point upward to a sky from sleeves that are centuries old. Here the old and the new harmonize, as do the memory and the speech of men. The Vatican owes much of its artistic fame to Raphael, and Raphael owes his fame partly to the Vatican. Only 37 years old when he died, it seems incredible that any man could accomplish so much in such a short time. A sculptor, a builder of churches and palaces, he is the most famous name in the history of painting, the greatest giver of forms to dreams the world has ever known. This great artist even worked in tapestry, and in the Vatican they hang side by side with his canvases. There are two incomparably valuable sets of tapestries designed by Raphael, one depicting events in the lives of the apostles, the other depicting the life and death of Christ. These tapestries have been through many strange experiences. After the death of Pope Leo X, they were pawned for 5,000 ducats. They somehow managed to survive the sack of Rome in 1527, although one still shows where it was cut in two to make it easier to sell. In 1798, these tapestries were sold to dealers, from whom Pius XII repurchased them, and in 1808, they returned to Rome. The process for keeping the murals in repair was invented by a Vatican artist and has been handed down from generation to generation. Frescoes have even been detached from a wall on which they were painted and transferred to canvas to preserve them. Time is no more sparing of art than of the faces of men. One of Raphael's last frescoes is that of St. Leo. Pope Leo I stopping Attila and his hordes at the gates of Rome. To the left, St. Leo on his white horse raises his ringed hand as if calling for divine intervention. Attila and his Huns stare in terror at the vision in the flaming sky. Ten tapestries depict events in the lives of the apostles. Woven of threads of silk and gold, these works are the most robust and intelligible of all Raphael's productions. The side borders of the tapestries are impersonations of the seasons, interwoven with other figures. Raphael's school of Athens has been called the finest, best balanced, and most perfect arrangement of figures that was ever put together by the genius of the Italian revival. The group of philosophers includes Aristotle and Plato. A tapestry portraying the first call to Peter, who kneels adoring the Master. One of Raphael's greatest masterpieces, many say the greatest, is his world-famous painting of the Transfiguration. It was also his last work, and as his own life seemed to many, was left incomplete. Only his genius could unite the glory of the upper half of the glorified Christ with the earthly agitated scene below. Fittingly, the picture hung over his bed as he lay in state. Just as access to the artwork is open to all alike, access to the hospitality of the Vatican has no relation to birth or station. Particularly welcome are groups of workers in whose defense the pontiff has so often written and pleaded. He addresses his visitors from the throne for 5 or 10 minutes. Although this is usually in Italian, if there is a group speaking some other language, he will use their native tongue. Pius XII is the complete master of 6 or 7 languages. And he passes on to the next duty. A passage through a door is not the beginning of a respite, such as a quiet hour spent in a library, but an introduction to a new task. The Vatican Library contains over 500,000 printed books and 60,000 manuscripts. The steel shelving necessary to house this library is 3 stories high and is 7 miles in length. The master of the household's waiting list of people desiring audiences never ends. Needless to say, these continual audiences place a great strain on the pontiff's physical strength, although it is one he accepts gladly. In the words of his predecessor, Pius XI, his house was the house of the common father, who liked to see it filled with his sons and daughters. There was also, he added, plenty of room for those who do not belong to the flock. Often the former 80-year-old pontiff had become so exhausted during these audiences that his escort had to support his arm as he extended it over the visitors kneeling before him. The ancient trees in the beautiful Vatican garden seem to stand dreaming over the many memories of their long lives. They have seen the white figure of many a pontiff walk through their outstretched arms, sometimes calmly in prayerful meditation, sometimes reading the affairs of state, but always alone. The peace of the world began in the garden, and it is to a garden the man of peace retires. With from 3.5 to 5 hours sleep a night, after his morning meditations and reading the breviary, he offers Holy Mass at 5:30. From then on until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when he walks in the garden, he belongs not to himself, but to the church and the world. The man who becomes pontiff becomes at that moment probably one of the loneliest individuals in the world. For most of his waking hours, he is surrounded by people, but cut off from them by protocol. Sometimes when the walk is over, an automobile returns him to his office. Since the Allied armies entered Rome, the visitors to the Vatican have been more varied than ever before. The British Tommies and the American GIs in Rome, curious about everything concerning the historic city, are particularly interested in the Vatican. Whether stationed there or on leave from someplace else, they flock into St. Peter's Square. Curiosity is justified in the spot that goes back to the very place where St. Peter, the first of the pontiffs, was crucified head downward. To the Catholics among the soldiers, this chance to visit St. Peter's and the Holy Father is a shiningly bright spot in the long months away from home. One of the most important acts to date of Pope Pius XII's pontificate was the papal consistory of cardinals held in the majestic Basilica of St. Peter's. During the dark war years, no new cardinals were named. But now the College of Cardinals has been convened to witness the solemn ceremony of the creation of 32 new princes of the Church, more than at any previous time. The new cardinals have been notified that from now on, the title of each will be Your Eminence. The day on which they are to be presented with a red hat, the new cardinals join the consistory. 4 new American cardinals are among them. 19 nations are represented. From the papal throne, the pontiff presided over the majestic ritual of the appointment of the cardinals. The red hat symbolizes the blood which the cardinals must be prepared to shed for their faith, if need be. Cardinal Stritch of Chicago. Cardinal Mooney of Detroit. The red hat is placed in symbolism on the head of Cardinal Glennon of St. Louis. No cardinal actually wears the red hat. It is kept as the official token of the cardinalate and is placed on its owner's coffin at his death. The words of the ceremony are spoken in Latin by Pope Pius.
Siete popoli cristiani, augumento testato romane ecclesia, se intrepidum exhibere debeat. in nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti.
Presentation of the red hat to Archbishop Spellman of New York gave the United States its 5th cardinal. Cardinal Spellman has long been a close friend of the Holy Father and a co-worker of his when he was Cardinal Pacelli. New cardinals prostrate themselves in prayer before the altar of the church built over the tomb of the first pontiff. Who knows whether among them may be the 263rd successor of St. Peter? 340 million people will always need a shepherd. But amidst all the pomp and circumstance, the Holy Father recalls the day of his coronation, when a bit of flax was set aflame and held before his face at the end of a staff, while an attendant chanted, Pater Sancte, sic transit gloria mundi. Holy Father, so passes the glory of the world. But what does not pass is the divine guarantee to the church, I shall be with you all days, even to the consummation of the world. In a day when the world is suffering from the nemesis of mediocrity and the dearth of great leadership, when people tend to lose their moral responsibility, it is indeed consoling to know that someone in the midst of chaos is keeping the blueprints of a moral order, and that a great voice still rings out, proclaiming that peace is grounded not on power, but on justice and on love. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God and thy neighbor as thyself. Gradually, men of goodwill are beginning to recognize that it does not take much time to make a better world. It requires only much love. It is a long cry from Galilee's to Tiber shores, but the echo of the divine master still resounds. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Never in history has there been so many shorn and bleating lambs, but rarely before has God in his providence given to their sorrow and their broken hearts one who merited more the glorious title Pastor Angelicus, angelic shepherd.
Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.